Subscribe to this podcast to get exclusive access to the after show Shooting the Breeze. Welcome to Cool Explorations. I'm your host, Tony Peters. Today we're going to be speaking with Neil Getzlow, who's a podcaster who has a podcast called Unmasked with Neil Getzlow. He's going to be talking about his testimony, talking about the podcast, how that started, and how he's seen God at work throughout his life as he battled with addiction, and how God's brought him to where he is now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cool Explorations. Today we have Neil Getzlow on. He has his own podcast, Unmasked with Neil Getzlow, so we will talk about that a little bit later. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and a little bit of what you do?
Sure. And thanks so much for having me on, a chance to share my testimony and talk a little bit about what I've been through in the podcast. I am living in Kansas City, Missouri right now with my wife and 5 stepsons. They're all older, so it's not like we have 5 boys running around the house, which would not be so good. That'd be a lot of challenges to my patience, I think. But I'm a communications professional in the PR industry, and have no spiritual or relationship with God for the first 49 years of my life. And the past 2 years, God has revealed himself to me in some pretty dramatic ways. And I'm just appreciate the opportunity to share that with other people and hopefully bring some encouragement to folks in their spiritual walk.
Yeah, and that's what sharing testimonies is all about, is really sharing that hope and encouragement to other believers, and to people who are non-believers, even, to just be able to see, oh, someone else has gone through this struggle and God is helping them. God can help me too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
For sure.
why don't you tell us a little about your testimony, and what God is currently doing in your life?
Yeah. So, and there's a lot of layers to this story, that very graphic details that we can explore however, wherever this conversation goes. But in April of 2020, God met me and helped me overcome a pornography and sex addiction that I had, that really for me started back when I was 9 years old. And that's the thing that I feel very fortunate about, because I know that people have addictions, even whether you're a believer or non-believer. Sometimes they don't break right away, right? And you relapse and you struggle with it. And I don't know why God picked me. I was an atheist. In fact, I grew up Jewish in a Jewish household, no connection to God whatsoever. But as really as an atheist as an adult, and in a snap of a fingers, Jesus healed me and gave me a new heart and instantly healed me from those addictions. I've not looked at porn since April 14th, 2020. So over 2.5 years now. And it's completely changed my life. I went from really celebrating every sin that you can imagine out there, and just, reveling in that. And, whether it was drugs or alcohol, sex, porn, whatever. Yep. I celebrated it. My life looks so much different today. It's amazing. I go to church every week. Obviously, I'd never been to church before, so that was the first thing I did. I've now gone through the Bible 3 times, and now about halfway through on read number 4. So still pretty new in my faith walk, and trying just to learn as much as I can and soak it up. But I'm reading the Bible. I'm listening to online sermons. For me, like I replaced all that junk food of my past life. And because it's true, God gave me a new heart. Like it is, I never would have believed it, that it could happen to me, but I've got this new heart and I truly have these new desires. All those things I loved to do in the past, I just don't have any desire to do those. Where my heart is today, I want to read the Bible every single day. I want to listen to as much online talk about Jesus, and help grow me spiritually as much as I can, and share that with my wife and friends and family. And I want to be an active member of the church, and I want to help other people know that they can overcome whatever they're going through too. And especially with pornography addiction, I know that is still a big issue inside the church, not one that people are comfortable talking about. So I make people a little bit uncomfortable when we get into the details of my testimony, but like that is what God has done to me. And I'm slowly starting to, I should mention I wrote a book, right? That was the first step out of all this was wrote a book about my testimony and started a podcast. So that's really where my ministry is today. But I know that there's more to it. And that's sort of what I'm wrestling with right now and praying about right now is what's the next step? Because I need to do more and I can do more. So what does that look like? And that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out now as I sort of see where this podcast goes and just see where God leads me.
Yeah, and God definitely takes it where he wants it to go, and
Yeah.
he can work amazing things. I know with my own experience too, it's it's a road and it's a journey, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't know where God is going to bring you, and prayer is definitely a key factor in that. Always being in communication with him is very, very important, because he answers prayer in so many ways. We even just had that last night. We actually rescued a little kitten that was abandoned by its mother. And I hate cats. I am not a cat person, but I do not like to see things suffer either. And starvation is not something I'd wish on anything. And this little kitten was definitely starving. So we spent half an hour trying to coax this little kitten into a dog kennel, which drove our dog nuts. And had little dog kibble in it, and it right away, like after 5 minutes having that kennel out, after we'd been coaxing it for 25 minutes, but 5 minutes having that kennel out, it popped into that kennel and it was digging into that food. And we prayed that God would find us someplace to have this cat, because my allergies were already going berserk as well. And actually within 15 minutes of having this cat, we had somebody who messaged us, and this was almost midnight, saying, I can come over and grab the cat tonight.
Wow.
And we're just like, thank you, God, because my allergies by morning would have been very bad, because my eyes were already sore and my nose was already stuffed. And so, but it's just, we prayed and God answered that prayer like almost immediately. And I think our lives are like that cat, like just it was starving, and we're starving in our lives for something meaningful.
Sure.
Until we find Jesus Christ. And
Yeah.
he fills it.
Yeah, without question, and that's, for me, that's, you go back to this 9-year-old little boy, and I was first exposed to pornography. There was this is the late 70s. So there's before the internet, way before the internet and all the danger that is in your phone. There was a little wooded area behind my elementary school, and it was nicknamed the Playboy Forest, because we would ride our bikes there after school, and inside this little forest area, there'd be ripped up pages of Playboy magazine all around this little area. And that's where we got first introduced to porn. And, one of the things that obviously Jesus was the number one way for me to heal my heart. But I'm also a big proponent of mental health and talking to a counselor and getting some professional guidance. And I went to a Christian-based counselor after all of this was, after my journey was unmasked to my wife, which we'll get into here in a little bit. And the first time I talked to him, he asked me this very specific question. First question he asked was, what is the first thing you had to learn how to do as a little boy? And I thought about it for a moment, and it just like hit me like a thunderbolt. It's like I had to learn how to be alone. My parents, I was of course a child of divorced parents from that time frame. So my parents split up about that time. I moved with my mom to an apartment, so moved away from all my friends. Then she started having to go to work now, being a single mom. So she's out of the house 40 hours a week. There's no other kids in this apartment complex. I had this hole in my heart, and I didn't know how to fill it up because it was hurting. It was alone. And I tried filling it up. It was with pornography. And like this, my mom, on either side of her bed, she had these two nightstands. And on these nightstands, she had these stacks of Playboy and Penthouse magazines. So as a preteen, what am I going to do? I've got this hole in my heart. I want love. I want affection. This is how I learned to medicate myself. And it formed that shame cycle that lasted 40 years, which is I'm not good enough to be loved. No, nobody wants to be with me. I'm going to medicate myself on this pornography. It's going to make me feel better. I look at it, I feel better, but then I'm also instantly feeling, I can't believe I did that. This is why nobody loves me. This is why I'm alone. And it just keeps cycling over and over again. And it manifested itself in so many different ways in my life from the time I was 9 years old to the time I was almost 50. It was a cycle that I constantly was living.
So that all led into, and we'll get into your addiction in a bit here, but
Yeah.
that all led into your podcast, Unmasked, with Neil Getzlow.
Yeah.
How did that kind of come about, and what do you usually discuss on your podcast?
So conveniently enough, my book was called Unmasked. So it was about unmasking my journey from, to finding God and conquering my sins and walking in victory. But that's one of the things that I learned as I started going to church and started building relationships with other, followers of Jesus. Was I used to think, right when I walked in that first time, I'm looking around thinking, there's nobody who's done anything as bad as me, right? Like I am the worst sinner in the world. I cannot believe I'm walking in here with all these people who, you know, um, who probably aren't, but right. I mean, I had no idea. But as I started talking to people, I realized, okay, we're all in pretty much the same boat, and we all have these so many interesting stories, and some are heartbreaking, and but they're encouraging, right? Of just and when I share my testimony and when I listen to other people give me their testimony, it fills me up with so much encouragement to see how Jesus is working in somebody's life. And that's sort of what inspired me to start my podcast. I want to unmask those stories of people who are, whether it was, a sex addiction, alcohol, whatever, unmasking their journeys to finding Christ. And then what are they doing now that Christ is a big part of their life? And it's been the people I've talked to, they've been amazing. The people that I've met and that I've come across. And I know we were talking before we started recording about just how God puts people in your lives. And He has filled up my life with so many incredible relationships, people that I never thought I would ever meet. Like I never would have met them in my old life. There's no way. And He's brought so many people into my life that has helped me on my journey, that has helped encourage me. And so this podcast that I do, I feel like is my way of, like, how do you pay back God for all that He's done, right?
Yeah.
It's impossible, but this is like one way to try to pay it forward, if you will, right? And just try to bring encouragement to other people. And at the end of the day, try to bring glory to God, because that's what this is all about. Like when I talk about my testimony, like it's not my story. It's not my wife's testimony. It is God's story. And he gave it to us for a specific reason. Don't know why, but I'm blessed that He has. It may be dark and dirty, but it is my story. And it is, as they say right there, like there may be, sadness and misery at night, but there is joy in the morning. And I feel like that's what my life has turned into. There was darkness, nothing but darkness, before I was saved. And we've come to the other side, and it is just nothing but light. And I want to share that with people. And I want to give other people a platform to share that light as well with others. And so that was sort of the inspiration behind the podcast. And I started it on March 1st, 2020 or 2022, which was the 2-year anniversary to when my life started to unmask and unravel. And we're about 25 episodes in, which I never thought, honestly, I thought we'd do, 2 or 3 and be like, okay, that's it. It's, it'll run its course, but we're up to 25, and we've got a long list of people to still interview and talk to. And, God is watering it, and He's growing it. It's this, it is not breaking any records. listenership wise, but it is growing, right? And that's like, that's glory to God for that.
Yeah, it's up to us to plant the seeds and the Holy
Yeah,
Spirit to do the watering and God to do the harvesting.
that's right.
So definitely, whatever we can do, we never know who we're reaching.
Yeah, that's right. You don't know who's listening. It's just, and I've always said, whether it was through the book, through my testimony, and through the podcast, I just, even if I just help one person, it's all been worth it.
Yeah.
That's it. I just, this isn't about me or anything. It's about just serving others, I think. And that's, a lesson that I'm still learning and trying to always remember. And sometimes I succeed, sometimes I don't, but it's taking the focus off me and putting my focus on somebody else and
Yeah.
trying to serve others. And I think this is my way of trying to serve.
Yeah. And leading up to that, we had briefly touched on the porn and sex addiction. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that journey and how God's kind of brought you to where you are now?
Yeah. So, and please feel free to stop me if any point you have questions as I sort of unravel this for everybody and how this happened. So, like I said, this goes back to when I was 9 years old. Over my teenage years, it would, and into my young adult years, like it would transform right from, it started with pornography. And just like any, addiction to drug, it starts at the low point and then you sort of need something stronger and heavier to help fill your heart. And so eventually at some point, porn wasn't good enough for me. And so I moved on to adult clubs, you move on to strip clubs, spending money to purchase pornography, not just, I mean, back in the, 80s and 90s, like it wasn't as prevalent, there's no internet, so it's not on your phone. So you actually had to spend money on buying magazines or videos, that kind of thing. And every step would accelerate. And ultimately, that addiction transformed into seeking out prostitutes and paying them to have sex with me. And going back to my teenage years, the pornography, it really messes with your brain. It totally short circuited me about what I thought about love. I thought sex equaled love, and that's how I'm going to fill up this heart that was looking for love, is through just random encounters through high school and through my college years with women. It was how I treated and viewed women as nothing but objects and just, sexual beings, which was damaging to both parties. Trying to, having sex with someone and thinking it was love instantly. Like my brain was just, the pornography just rewired my brain, and it really short circuited my thinking. It was something that I just I could not break free from as much as I wanted to. So this, like I said, this manifests itself over 4 decades of my life, and it ruined one marriage and was very well ruining a second marriage to my current wife, Amy. And so I got married to Amy in 2012. We met in 2008. When we met, neither of us were believers. So Amy grew up Catholic. I grew up, like I said, I grew up in a Jewish household. So I was really more culturally Jewish than anything, for the food and the jokes, as Seinfeld would say, but that was about it. No God part or anything. And so I considered myself an atheist. And so when we first met, we had a great fun time together. We were loving all the sins, premarital sex, everything, right? And that's what our life was. 3 months after we got married, Amy told me she found Jesus and was saved. And that threw me for a big loop, because when I met Amy to the time she told me that, I'd say I rarely looked at porn. I was definitely not visiting prostitutes or doing anything like that. It had sort of that addiction sort of had, gone away for a little while, I would say. But when she told me that, there was, I don't know how to describe it, but well, what the thought was, it goes back to the shame cycle, right? So it's like, well, here I am again. Amy's got a new relationship with Jesus. What about me? So I'm feeling this is all irrational thought on my part,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I'm feeling alone and isolated. So what am I going to do? I'm going to start acting out.
Yeah.
And from that moment, it started back with the porn, and I'd watch porn constantly. And by this time now, it's all over your cell phone. And then I'd say about 3.5 years into our marriage, um, that's when I started visiting prostitutes. And here's the amazing thing: is that Amy prayed for me for 8 years for me to get saved. And so I will just offer that up to anyone out there who has someone that might be struggling with an addiction, or someone, like, don't ever underestimate the power of prayer, because she prayed 8 long years for me to get saved. And she never would have, I think, I don't know if deep down in her heart if she ever thought it would happen, but she kept praying, and and a miracle happened for her. And that miracle took took the form of a prostitute in Chicago in February of 2020. I was on a business trip, and as I do on a lot of business trips, I look for opportunities to meet with people. And so on the day I was supposed to fly home that morning, I don't know why, but there was something inside me that said, I'm going back to this. My heart was just broken for whatever reason. I was just a shell of myself and low self-esteem. And it's like, I'm going to go visit a prostitute. Set up an appointment with someone in downtown Chicago, went up to her room and went through with the appointment. And as I was getting ready to leave the appointment, there's a second bedroom in this hotel room, and the door opens up, and this large man who looked like a linebacker, or more like an offensive lineman from the Chicago Bears, walked out dressed in drag, mind you, walked out of the room. And in his left hand, he was holding up his cell phone, which showed a picture of my wife and it had her contact information. And he said, "You're going to have to pay us more money, or we're going to call your wife." And, I put myself in some pretty horrific situations that I look back on now. It's like, I can't believe I actually took that chance. So when this guy walks out with Amy's information, like that, my first thought was, I'm just going to do whatever it takes to get out of this room, because I don't want to die in a hotel room in Chicago. And that be the call that Amy gets. So I managed to get out of that room about $900 later. But as I'm literally sprinting to the elevator, I can hear the door open up behind me, and this couple yells, "Hey, you're going to have to pay us more money, or we're going to call your wife." And so, but I get in the elevator, get out of the hotel, and go on with my day. And that's why I called my book and now the podcast Unmasked, because I went about my day. I put on my mask, this mask that I had on for 40 years. Nobody knew about my pornography addiction. Nobody ever knew that I visited prostitutes. No family, no friends, nobody. And I put my mask on and went about my day and acted like nothing happened. I'd gotten so good at hiding it, so good at compartmentalizing this different life, the second life that I that had great meetings, had a great day of doing business, and made it home into Chicago, back to Kansas City. Amy picked me up from the airport, and they still hadn't called her. So I'm thinking, okay, they got their money out of me. They'll get bored. They'll leave me alone, and all is good. But 3 days later, this is Sunday, March 1st at 2020, and about 9:30 p.m. that night, I'm working on my computer in my office, and my phone starts blowing up again. It's this couple, and they're texting me, and this time they say, "You've got 15 minutes to pay us more money, or we're going to call your wife." And again, they send a picture of her social media accounts and contact information. And I don't know what, like, all I kept thinking was, I'm just, and this is probably not the best thing to be thinking, but it's like, I'm just going to ignore it. again, I'm hoping they're going to get bored. They'll find that they probably have other targets they can go after. They'll get bored messing with me and move on. Well, and 15 minutes later, they must have gotten bored, but instead of moving on, they decided to ignite the nuclear bomb in my world. And I like to say this is the first time that God met me with a 2x4, because 15 minutes later, I hear my wife's phone start to blow up upstairs, and they called her and told her what had happened. And as soon as she got done with them, she's comes barging downstairs, and I can hear her footsteps even now, just getting louder and louder as they're coming into my office. And the door barges open, and she's like, "Are you cheating on me?" And of course, I did what any good addict would do at the time, which was I lied. I said, "This is the first time anything like this has ever happened. I never will do it again. I'm so sorry." But I was more sorry about being caught than I was sorry about, my actions or activities or hurting my wife, right? That wasn't even a thought at the time. It was more about what was, my actions, and can't believe I messed that up. I can't believe I was so dumb.
Yeah, addiction is so self-centered and me-focused.
Yeah. But that still didn't, even in that moment. So again, Amy, she didn't have any real hard proof that there was anything else going on. So she kind of accepted my story. And now also think about this too. So this happens in March 2020. About 2 weeks after that phone call, we get locked down in the US because of COVID. And so now basically, and both of our jobs were impacted for 6 weeks by that. So we're at home alone with this big giant issue in front of us, trying to navigate that, which was rather uncomfortable. And again, so Amy's trying to talk to me about Jesus. I don't know if you're familiar with Ray Waters and the Living Waters ministry, Ray Comfort and Living Waters ministry, but she used to play videos from Ray as he does his street evangelism, and she'd play them for me at night. So I like fall asleep and like subliminally maybe get the message. But I told her, she's trying to convert me very heatedly over, the course of 6 weeks, said, I just feel like there's 99.9% sure that I will never give myself to Jesus. And I know she was pretty disappointed by that, and probably thinking at that point, this marriage isn't going to work. And so fast forward to April 13th of 2020. And again, we've been home alone now for 6 weeks, but my addiction starts to come back again. And I set up an appointment to meet someone that I had a relationship with in Kansas City, another woman, for an encounter. And I did it all on my laptop, and I have text messaging on my laptop. And so I'm working in my office, Amy's upstairs, and I send these messages, and I lock my computer, or so I thought I did. And as soon as I left the house to go to this meeting, again, Amy does not have any of my passwords to my computer or phone at this time. God helped me leave my phone, my computer unlocked, because Amy was able to get on there, see these messages, take screenshots, and then send these to me as I'm on my way to meet this woman. She's like, "What is going on?"
Good for her.
Yeah, I'm just like, okay, how am I going to spin this when I get home? And so I turn around and go back, and frankly, I don't even remember what I told her when I got home. I just know it's just a bunch of, my life was unraveling, right? The secret world I had was slowly unraveling. I'm just grasping for straws, and she is not buying anything that I'm telling her, rightly so. And that night before we went to bed, she's like, "There's only one way you're going to be able to save this marriage, and you're going to have to pray to God and ask for help." And so we went to bed that night. I wake up the next morning, Amy's gone. She had left to go somewhere and didn't tell me where. And so I'm like, well, this is as good as time as any to ask for help. And that was the first time I prayed. And I said, "God, I don't know what to do. Like I'm at the end of my rope here. I'm in a corner. I need help. I can't do this alone. Please, give me a sign that help is out there. As soon as that prayer ended, the garage door pops open and it's Amy. And I didn't realize it at the time, but now looking back on it, like Amy's the key to this whole story. So she comes home, comes upstairs, and I tell her, look, you know, I prayed. I really want to work on our marriage. I'm truly sorry. And, my heart is starting to sort of, open up a little bit. And she's, very reluctantly, he's like, okay, we can, I definitely want to try to work on things. But she was very reluctant, of course, because I've lied to her before. There's no reason to think that this is going to change. And then finally, the last 2x4 to the head from God happened later that afternoon. We're on the couch. Amy gets a message on Facebook from some dude we don't know. And all it says is, do you know a Neil Getzlow? And it turns out this was the ex-boyfriend of another woman that I had been meeting with, who found all the receipts on his ex-girlfriend's iPad and was starting to send them all to Amy. Well, even before that happened, I don't know. As soon as she read that message to me, there was something inside of me that just I don't know what happened. But as I describe in the book, it felt like I needed to throw up and I needed to confess everything to Amy. And kind of like when you get sick, you can feel it, gurgling in your stomach, and it just works its way up and out and you can't stop it. And that's what happened to me. God compelled me to tell her everything that I was doing, and I came clean to Amy. And just like what happens after you get sick, and I like to say, I just threw up all over the floor of our marriage, but I felt instantly better, right? I felt relieved. I felt like, okay, this was 40 years in the making. I got this off my shoulder. I felt great. And then I look at Amy and I'm just like, okay, what is going to come out of her mouth now? And I was expecting the worst. And what I got was Jesus. And she looked at me and she said, Neil, Jesus forgave me for my sins. How can I not forgive you for yours? I forgive you. And that was the moment that the chains of my addictions broke, that exact moment. And I know people hear that and think that it's crazy, but I feel blessed and very fortunate that Jesus and the Holy Spirit worked that quick in my life because there's a higher calling for me, because to break those chains, like he broke them for a reason, which is for me to help tell others how they can break these chains that they have and to give others hope and encouragement. And it was like, and I look back on it now, that wasn't just Amy saying, talking to me. That was Jesus through Amy saying, I forgive you. And that I want to make it clear, like that forgiveness, it changed everything for us. It changed my life. It changed our marriage. It changed the trajectory of our life. I cannot stress that enough, how much it transformed where we used to be to where we are today, and the kind of marriage we have today. That it is amazing. But I want to stress, it did not take any of the accountability away from what I had to do to own up for these sins. I had work that I had to do, which was, again, I had to show to Amy that what I was saying was real. She needed these fruits that Jesus is producing in our lives. That's the only way she was going to know this is real. You can tell someone, oh, I'm going to change, but then you look at their actions and it's like, did you really? And I know Amy had a lot of doubts when this first went down, but again, that change was instantaneous. I went from hating church to loving church, from not really wanting to read the Bible to wanting to read it every minute of every day. Like I still can't believe, I don't know, like, how did I get here? I mean, almost every day I just look up and like, how am I here? And it's amazing to me how I got here at times. But it's awesome. Like I'm so glad that, you look back and the shame I used to feel for the things that I did. Like this is something I have to work on, of how to forgive myself. Right. Amy's forgiven me and Jesus has forgiven me. I got to forgive myself for those, for the evil that I brought in, into my world. And just, it was that journey that got me to where I am today. And the journey has just started.
Yeah, and you talked about counseling as well. I know
Yeah.
that's something that I found very helpful in my own life, both secular counseling and Christian counseling. I think they both have different things to offer. What was that counseling experience like for you?
Yeah. So we, like I said, we found, we were able to find through our church a Christian based, faith based counselor that we started talking to. And we probably talked to him for a year and a half. We started obviously going, we started, I spent probably 2 or 3 weeks with him up front, and Amy spent 2 or 3 weeks with him up front. And then we would talk every 2 weeks with him together. And it was just, it was, it was a way for us to start to be vulnerable with each other as we're working through in a safe space, right? Because I think Amy felt like she could really be honest about, how she was feeling when there was someone else there that could understand her perspective and could, you know kind of get me to understand what she was going through. I think that's one of the things that, you know that we struggled with at the beginning, because Amy, when this happened, Amy was like a detective. So she would relive every conversation. She would go through my phone with a fine-tooth comb looking for any shred of evidence from my past, just to try to put the pictures together. And I, when that would happen, like, I would get defensive over it, which is not the right way to respond in the situation. But this was new to me too. So I had to learn not to be defensive. And that's where, the counselor helped us both understand what we were feeling. He gave us things to work on together. And he just, you know, and it's not rocket science, right? But it's one of the things that my counselor did tell me, because Amy and I we had very not very good communication skills together as a married couple. And she very much wanted to address this. Like, I just was not very talkative with her. I mean, because I was hiding behind this mask.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what my counselor said. He's like, it's no wonder you had no energy to talk to Amy, because it was taking every ounce of your brain to try to keep all the lies in your head straight. But once you threw all those away, now you're free and clear to actually have a conversation with your wife and not worry about what lies you're going to expose. And it's so true. Like, and if you asked Amy today, she would tell you that uh, we I talk more now than I ever have. It's
Yeah.
probably not perfect for her necessarily, but it's, like I said, it's our marriage is in such a different spot today. Like, I love spending time with my wife. That is a phrase that I never would used to say. But I want to spend every second of the day with her. I want to serve her. I want to love her like God commands husbands to honor and love their wives. It is just, still, it's, yeah, it's crazy how it changes,
Yeah.
how Jesus can, like I said, give you a new heart. And that's what I got, is a new heart.
Yeah, and marriage is often compared to our biblical relationship with Jesus Christ, or the bridegroom, or the bride needs a bridegroom. But we just need that communication. It's key in any relationship. And just like the Bible compares our relationship to marriage, uh, communication was there right away in the early parts of Scripture, where God communed with Adam and Eve in the garden. And it's just like that in marriage, where we need that communication. And like you said, when you're hiding something, that communication isn't going to be there, because you're wondering, when am I going to slip up? Like, oh,
Yeah.
how am I going to avoid this? Did they pick up on this? Like, those are probably the kinds of things running through your own mind, as I know they did with my own addiction, back when that was an issue for me. And God really had to get to work throughout that, because yeah, without him, I wouldn't have been able to get past that. I wouldn't be where I am now.
Yeah.
helping other people and speaking openly about these things. Um, how have you kind of seen God at work throughout this whole process, right from when you're struggling to now?
Yeah, that's a great question because it's hard to answer only because I think God is working every single day, every moment of every day. He's working on things. And, obviously, going back to when, my whole life got unraveled, that was God's hand working to sort of force me to address this issue head on, and then giving me a new heart so that all the things that I used to love, I didn't love anymore. And I will say this, like, I know that a lot of people look back on 2020 and with COVID and think about how that was the worst year of their lives. And I know people lost loved ones during that year, and it was horrible from that standpoint. I lost my dad in 2020, but I will also say that time was probably the best time as well for me. It was the best year of my life because God took away everything I loved in 2020. He took away the porn. He took away the prostitutes. He took away going out and partying with my friends because, well, now we can't go out anymore because the restaurants are shut down. We're all locked down. I can't do that. He took away sports. I consider myself a sports addict. Like that was my identity was wrapped in sports and how my team did. And if my team had a great week, I was on a high. And if my team had lost, it ruined my week. Got rid of that. There are no sports in 2020. God took all that away and said, okay, here's your chance. You have a chance to reset your life. What are you going to do? And so I had free will. Like I had a choice. He showed me the path to what to do. The question is, was I going to take that invitation and take that path? But when I started taking those steps, that's when he started blessing me. And so there are people that have fallen away in my life, old friends who, well, no one's been mean about it. I know that they've gone away because I'm on this different, just in a different place than they are, and they're still drinking and partying and all that. That's just not who I am anymore. But I see God replacing and filling me up with new people in my world, with new relationships that fill me up with things that I want to do, that glorify Him. And it's just, when God prunes away one area of the life, He builds up, the right fruit in another area, and that's happened in with relationships. It obviously happened in my marriage and turning that around, and um, just through the church, the connection that I've had with the people that I met through my church. Like it's hard to, like I said, it's hard to accurately articulate all that God has done, because I think every day God has done something to show me His glory. And that's the thing. Like, it doesn't have, like, I know people get this idea that you're going to find Jesus and now everything is rainbows and sunshine. Everything's going to be great. No, that's not necessarily how it is. There are hard days and there are easy days. There are days when I think I don't give into I don't give into my worst addictions, but there are days where I'm very selfish. And then God reveals Himself, whether it's someone, putting someone in my path that says an encouraging word to me, whether it's reading scripture and it's just the right verse at the right time that helps me reset my mind. What I have, though, it's more than happiness, because happiness is what happens to us, is the external stuff, the environment around us that makes us happy. It is truly that joy and contentment that no matter what is happening in my life, I find joy and contentment knowing that I have a relationship with Jesus. And to me, that's the biggest thing that I've got. Again, not every day is perfect. I fall short of God's glory probably every hour of every single day, right? Like most of us do. And but but I'm always reminded, of, I can read the Bible, and be just as happy as I would before going out and drinking with my friends. It's just the little things that you appreciate more, that I appreciate more. And just when I put, when I, you know, the other thing that, that I'm feel like I'm called to do is to help talk about pornography and talk about the dangers of pornography and helping bring encouragement to other people by through my testimony. And I know that it's God working, because even here today, just sharing my testimony with you, and it's been a couple months since I've had the opportunity to do that, but just sharing it with you, like, it just fills me up with encouragement, and it's God's way of saying, I love you. This is, I, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go and talk about, helping people understand that it's never too late. Like, you can turn your life around. You just have to ask God for help.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably a long way of not even answering your question, but
No, that's great, because I mean, yeah, we definitely need to hear that, and we all need to remember that we all fall short of the glory of God.
Yeah.
And we all sin, and we need to be loving and accepting of one another, and like we were talking about before, come alongside each other.
Yeah.
And telling our story is part of that. It's helping to encourage people in their walk.
I mean, I'll show this story about where I know God was walking beside me. So this is back in 2020. This is probably July of that year. So I'd been saved for about 3 months, but again, we're still locked down. So that was the weird thing about it, is like, I'm still leading a double life, but now it's sort of a different double life. Now I've got all these old friends who we're not seeing each other, so they don't know I found Jesus. But here I am, like, reading the Bible and watching, all these videos on YouTube about Jesus and all this stuff. And we couldn't go to church. So I hadn't met people yet from church to sort of get that encouragement and fill up, right? And so in July of 2020, someone from the Amy's church, which is now my church, called looking for Amy, but called my cell phone. And I got the message, and I was so, I'd never talked to this guy before. And all he said was, "Hey, we're just checking in on you. We wanted to see if you're doing all right in the middle of COVID. If there's anything that you need, anything from the church that you need, just let us know." That never happened to me before. Like, I'd never experienced someone just reaching out for the sake of, "Hey, we're thinking about you. Are you okay?" I know it seems very small and minor, but it was just another way for God to reveal himself to me and what it meant to be part of the church, to be part of that community. And like, I called them right back and said, "Hey, I know you were looking for my wife, but this is her husband. I'm newly saved." And I talked this guy's ear off. Like, and I just jumped right into my testimony, and like, I must have blown him away. Like, who are you? But it turned, I mean, it was great. And it fueled a tremendous relationship and a friendship that I have today. And so it's those, again, it's those little things that God reveals. It's not, sometimes it's not the big things, right? It's just those little moments in life where that God's hand is at work.
Yeah, and he works in small ways, he works in big ways.
Yeah.
And it's learning to look for those that really helps you grow.
For sure.
What advice would you have for addicts who are really afraid to come out about their addiction, whether it's drugs, alcohol, sex, porn, any of that kind of?
Well, I would say that there are people that care about you, and there are people that love you, and you may feel like you're hurting people with your addictions, but it's okay. Like, you're hurt. You've got to take that first step, because what do you have to lose? And that's where I was at. And, just speaking for myself, like, I had to make a choice. I was either going to continue down this path of being stuck in my addictions, and it would have led me to taking more and more risks. And I'm confident that I would have ended up dead somewhere, because I would have met the wrong person at the wrong time. That's how dangerous my actions were getting. I would just say that's my advice: is don't be afraid to take that first step. And for me, it was taking that first step toward God. And don't be afraid to ask God for help, because he is out there. No matter if you think that you're the biggest sinner in the world, the biggest addict in the world, his help and his mercy, his grace is available for everybody. So don't be afraid to take that first step and get help, and be honest with your spouse or your partner, whoever you are. You might be hurting with your addiction, is just be honest about it. And don't be afraid to talk to someone. And maybe you don't have anyone in your circle of friends or family that you can trust, then go find someone to talk to. Because I think, again, for me, that was a huge step, not only talking to God, but finding someone to talk to helps me understand, why am I doing these things? And it's not just, don't just address the behavior, because there are plenty of things we can do to stop the behavior, but get to the root issue. What caused you to start behaving that way? And that's what I had to do. And I had to go way back to my childhood to find out my behavior, my addiction started way back then. It was an attempt for me, to find love and to fill up my heart with the love that I was missing. So find out, what is that, what is driving your behavior. I think that's where you need to start. Not the behavior itself, but what's behind that behavior, I think, is the key to recovery.
Yeah, and that's where counselors are
Yeah,
great.
absolutely. Absolutely. And just don't give up. I know things can seem dark and like there's just nowhere else to turn. And I used to think the same way. I would have these encounters with women and would leave those appointments and get into my car and drive all the way home thinking, I'm never going to do this again. I'm never going to do this again. And then like 2 days later, here I am doing the same exact thing again. So, there's just ways to break free from it. And it started with God. Maybe for you, it starts somewhere else, but that's what Amy would always say to me. She's like, what have you got to lose? She's like, if I'm wrong and you're right, well, then we both have lost nothing. But she's like, if I'm right and you're wrong, you've lost everything. And so I remember that. And that's a good lesson for me to remember.
It's a good lesson for all of us to remember.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming on. It's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed this. We'll see you back on again.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Cool Explorations. You've just been listening to Neil Getzlow, who has a podcast, Unmasked with Neil Getzlow. He's just been talking about his podcast as well as his struggles with addiction and how God brought him through those and brought him into the life that he's got now and the point where he's at in his faith now. If you'd like to reach out to me, you can do so through tpeters745@gmail.com. Well, I have just been blessed with so many people who are requesting to be on the show, and I'm impressed with how many people want to share their testimonies or what they're doing for the Lord right now. If I haven't got back to you, I promise I will get back to you. I look forward to speaking with each of you and interviewing you, and keep tuning into the show. There's lots of new people that are coming on here, and if you're considering wanting to come on the show, just shoot me an email at tpeters745@gmail.com, and I will get back to you.